The empire stretched across 47 star systems. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved countless species. Their warriors were feared throughout the galaxy. Their technology was centuries ahead of most civilizations. They believed themselves to be the supreme power in the universe. And then they discovered Earth. It was a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star at the edge of a spiral arm. The scout ship that first detected it was on a routine mapping mission in the year that humans called 1920. The scout commander, a young officer named, watched the planet through his sensors with growing interest. The beings on this world were curious creatures. They walked on two legs. They had soft skin and fragile bodies. They lived short lives, rarely more than 80 rotations around their star. But what caught attention was something else entirely. These creatures were violent. Watched as the humans fought each other with primitive weapons. They used chemical explosives and metal projectiles. They flew in crude aircraft made of wood and fabric. They sailed across their oceans in ships powered by burning fuel. They killed each other by the millions over borders, resources, and ideas. Sent his report back to the High Council. The council members read it with great interest. Here was a species that was aggressive, numerous, and technologically primitive. They would make excellent slaves. Their planet had abundant resources. Their location was strategically valuable. But the council was patient. They did not rush into conquest. That was not the way. They decided to wait and watch. They would study these humans. They would learn their weaknesses. They would prepare for a perfect invasion. Commander was chosen to lead this great project. He was the finest military mind in the empire. He had conquered 11 worlds without losing a single battle. His strategies were studied in every military academy. He was cold, calculating, and absolutely ruthless. Took his assignment seriously. He established a secret observation post on the dark side of Earth's moon. He sent cloaked probes into Earth's atmosphere. He intercepted radio signals and translated human languages. He watched their wars with the careful attention of a predator studying its prey. The humans fascinated him. They were so primitive yet so creative in their violence. They developed new weapons constantly. They fought a great war that spread across their entire planet. They used poison gas and automatic weapons and armored vehicles. Millions died. Recorded everything. Then came an even greater war. The humans split into two major factions and tried to destroy each other. Watched as they bombed cities flat. He watched as they developed faster aircraft and larger explosions. He watched as they created a new type of weapon that could destroy an entire city in a single blast. This nuclear weapon concerned the council briefly, but their scientists assured them that shields could withstand such primitive atomic devices. The humans posed no real threat. Continued his observations through what humans called the Cold War. He watched them fight in places called Korea and Vietnam. He studied their tactics, their weapons, their strategies. He noted their strengths and weaknesses. The humans were strong in some ways. They were adaptable. They could survive in harsh conditions. They fought with passion and determination. They were willing to die for abstract concepts like freedom and honor. But they were weak in other ways. They were divided. They fought among themselves constantly. Their governments could not agree on anything. Their weapons, while improving, remained primitive by galactic standards, bullets and bombs and chemical rockets. Designed his invasion plan carefully. He built training facilities across 3 worlds. He created exact replicas of human cities and battlefields. He programmed holographic simulators with human soldiers carrying rifles and grenades. He trained his warriors to fight in Earth's heavier gravity. For decades, the preparations continued. Soldiers learned to speak human languages. They studied human culture and psychology. They practiced combat against simulated human opponents millions of times. They developed armor that could stop any human bullet. They built weapons that could slice through human vehicles like paper. by 1991 had 3 million warriors ready. They were the finest fighting force ever assembled. Each soldier had trained for at least 50 years. Each one had killed thousands of simulated humans in virtual combat. Each one was worth 100 human soldiers, perhaps more. The High Council approved the invasion timeline. They would launch in 30 years, giving them time to build the transport fleet and make final preparations. And then made a decision that would doom them all. He stopped watching. The humans believed had reached their peak. They had nuclear weapons, jet aircraft, and satellite communications. They had tanks and helicopters and guided missiles. These were the weapons his warriors had trained against. These were the threats they were prepared to face. What more could the humans possibly develop? Turned his attention to logistics and fleet construction. The observation posts continued to operate, but no one analyzed the data with any urgency. The reports piled up unread. The humans seemed to be doing the same things they had always done. Fighting small wars, watching television, driving automobiles. They did not notice when the humans created something called the Internet. They did not pay attention when human computers began doubling in power every 2 years. They did not observe the quiet revolution happening in human laboratories and research centers. They missed the development of stealth aircraft that were invisible to radar. They missed the creation of drones that could strike targets from thousands of miles away. They missed the birth of artificial intelligence and autonomous weapon systems. They missed everything that mattered. In 2020, Commander declared his forces ready. 800 warships carried 3 million warriors toward Earth. The fleet traveled through hyperspace for 5 years, arriving in Earth orbit on a quiet Tuesday morning in 2025. Stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the blue planet. He felt nothing but confidence. His warriors had trained for a century. They had prepared for every scenario. They knew the humans better than the humans knew themselves. Or so he believed. Below him, Earth looked peaceful. Clouds drifted across blue oceans. City lights glittered on the night side. It looked exactly like the images from his old reconnaissance files. But appearances can be deceiving. In the 34 years since stopped paying attention, humanity had changed. They had grown. They had advanced in ways they could not imagine, and they had been waiting. They had been waiting for a very long time. Danny was having a boring night. He sat at his console deep inside a mountain in Colorado, watching screens that showed nothing but empty space. He had been working at the Space Command Center for 3 years, and nothing interesting ever happened. His coffee was cold. His eyes were tired. He was thinking about his girlfriend and wondering if she was still awake when something strange appeared on his screen. At first, he thought it was a glitch. 800 objects had suddenly appeared in high Earth orbit. That was impossible. Objects did not just appear. They came from somewhere. They had trajectories. They followed the laws of physics. Danny blinked and looked again. The objects were still there, and they were big. His training kicked in. He picked up the phone and called his supervisor. His voice shook slightly as he spoke. "Sir, you need to see this right now." Within 2 minutes, the command center was in chaos. Officers ran to their stations. Phones rang constantly. The main screen showed 800 unknown contacts hovering above North America. General Lisa received the call at her home in Virginia. She listened for exactly 15 seconds before hanging up. Then she got dressed and drove to the Pentagon at dangerous speeds. Her security detail struggled to keep up. Lisa had spent her entire life preparing for war. She had served in combat zones. She had commanded troops in difficult situations. She had risen through the ranks by being smarter, tougher, and more prepared than anyone else. But nothing had prepared her for this. Aliens, real aliens, they were finally here. The strange thing was, Lisa was not surprised. Humanity had suspected for decades that they were not alone in the universe. The governments of the world had made secret preparations. They had developed weapons and defenses that the public knew nothing about. They had hoped these preparations would never be needed. That hope had just died. Lisa entered the Pentagon's underground command center and took charge immediately. Officers briefed her on the situation. The alien ships were holding position. They had not attacked yet. They seemed to be waiting for something. Around the world, similar scenes played out. In Moscow, generals gathered in bunkers. In Beijing, commanders activated defense systems. In London, Paris, and Tokyo, military leaders made urgent phone calls. For the first time in human history, every major power was focused on the same threat. Then the alien spoke. The message came through on every frequency. It played on televisions, radios, and phones around the world. A harsh, clicking voice spoke in perfect English, Russian, Chinese, and every other human language simultaneously. People of Earth, I am commander of the Empire. Your planet has been selected for incorporation into our domain. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. Your leaders will present themselves at the following coordinates. Your military forces will stand down and disarm. Your population will await further instructions. There was a pause, then the voice continued. Resistance is not advised. We have studied your species for 100 years. We know your capabilities. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your defenses cannot stop us. We have 3 million warriors ready to land on your surface. Each one is worth 100 of your soldiers. Another pause. Surrender and you will be granted the honor of serving the Empire. Resist and you will be destroyed. You have 1 hour, choose wisely. The message ended. Silence filled command centers around the world. In Washington, President Gary sat in the White House Situation Room surrounded by his advisors. He was a calm man, known for his steady nerves in difficult situations, but even he felt the weight of this moment pressing down on him. Options, he said quietly. General spoke first. Sir, we have assets in place. The Helsinki Protocol is ready to activate. Several people in the room shifted uncomfortably. The Helsinki Protocol was the most classified program in human history. It was a secret agreement between every major nation to cooperate on planetary defense. It had been created 40 years ago after a series of strange signals were detected from deep space. The public knew nothing about it. Even most government officials had no idea it existed, but those who did know understood what it meant. Humanity had been preparing too. A young Air Force captain named Chris sat at a console in the corner. He had been monitoring the alien communications and running them through analysis software. Now he raised his hand. Sir, I've been analyzing their transmission. They said they studied us for 100 years, but their description of our weapons and tactics matches our capabilities from the 1990s. They mentioned tanks, helicopters, and guided missiles. They said nothing about directed energy weapons, hypersonic systems, or autonomous drones. The room went quiet. Everyone understood what Chris was suggesting. General nodded slowly. They stopped watching. They prepared for the war we could fight 30 years ago, not the war we can fight today. President looked around the room. He saw fear in some faces, but he also saw determination. These were people who had trained for crisis. They were ready. What do you recommend, General? Lisa did not hesitate. Sir, I recommend we decline their offer, firmly. The president thought for a long moment. Surrendering would mean slavery for the entire human race. Fighting would mean risking everything on weapons that had never been tested in real combat. The fate of 8 billion people rested on his decision. He made his choice. Get me a line to Moscow and Beijing, then activate the protocol. Around the world, secret facilities powered up. In Nevada, underground bunkers hummed with energy. In the oceans, submarines rose toward the surface. In orbit, satellites that were officially listed as weather monitors began receiving new targeting data that had given humanity 1 hour to surrender. They would not need nearly that long to respond. Commander waited patiently on his bridge. He had done this before many times. The conquered species always needed time to accept their fate. Some surrendered immediately. Others made futile gestures of defiance before submitting. None had ever truly threatened his forces. He checked the time. The humans had used 12 minutes of their hour. He wondered if they would try to negotiate or simply surrender. His communications officer looked up with a confused expression. "Commander, we are detecting energy buildup on the planet's surface. Multiple locations. The signature is unfamiliar." Frowned. Energy buildup. What could the humans possibly be doing? He would learn the answer in exactly 35 seconds. And he would never forget it. Colonel Amy Park sat in a chair that cost more than most houses. The chair was located in a control room that did not officially exist, buried half a mile beneath the Nevada desert. She had spent 15 years training for this moment, and she had always hoped it would never come. Now it was here. Her fingers rested on a console that controlled 24 orbital platforms. These platforms were listed in government records as weather monitoring satellites. They had been launched over the past 2 decades using classified rockets. Each one weighed 40 tons and contained technology that would have seemed like magic just 50 years ago. They were not weather satellites, they were weapons. Amy watched her screen as the alien fleet held position above Earth. 800 ships, each one the size of a small city. 3 million warriors waiting to descend and conquer her planet. It was a terrifying sight. But Amy was not afraid, she was angry. The order came through her headset. A calm voice spoke 3 words. "Protocol 7, execute." Amy pressed a button. In orbit, 24 satellites came to life. Solar panels shifted to draw maximum power. Targeting computers locked onto ships. Capacitors that had been charging for years released their stored energy in a single devastating pulse. Beams of focused light shot across space at 186,000 miles per second. There was no warning. There was no sound. There was no time to react. Light travels faster than any alarm system. The beams hit the ships and passed through them like needles through cloth. Commander was looking at a tactical display when it happened. One moment, his screen showed 800 friendly contacts. The next moment, 312 of those contacts were gone. They had been replaced by expanding clouds of debris. Stared at the screen. His mind refused to accept what he was seeing. This was impossible. The humans had no weapons that could do this. His intelligence was perfect. His preparations were complete. This could not be happening. But it was happening. His communications officer screamed something about massive casualties. His tactical officer shouted for evasive maneuvers. His weapons officer demanded permission to return fire. The bridge dissolved into chaos. Forced himself to focus. He grabbed his command console and began issuing orders. All ships scatter. Random evasion patterns. Return fire on any energy source you detect. Launch fighters. Begin landing operations immediately. The remaining ships broke formation. They accelerated in different directions, trying to become harder targets. Their weapons systems searched for threats, but there was nothing to target. The beams had come from satellites too small to register on their sensors. The second wave hit 11 seconds later. Amy had already redirected her satellites to new targets. The weapons took time to recharge, but she had staggered their firing sequence. While some were cooling down, others were ready to fire. It was like a deadly rhythm, a dance of destruction. 173 more ships died in the second volley. Watched his fleet disintegrate. Ships that had traveled across the galaxy, crewed by warriors who had trained for a century, were being destroyed in seconds. His tactical display looked like a wound, bleeding red markers that represented dead vessels. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Where are these attacks coming from?" His science officer worked frantically at a console. "Commander, the weapons appear to be directed energy systems, orbital platforms. They were hidden in plain sight among the human satellite network." "Directed energy," his voice cracked. "That technology is centuries beyond their capability." "Apparently not, Commander." 3 more ships exploded, then 4 more, then 12. The satellites were firing faster now, their targeting computers learning and adapting with each volley. On Earth, Amy watched the carnage with grim satisfaction. She had no sympathy for the invaders. They had come to enslave her people. They had spent 100 years planning to conquer her world. Now they were learning the cost of that ambition. Her assistant, a young lieutenant named Marsh, spoke quietly beside her. "Colonel, we've destroyed 423 ships, more than half their fleet in 48 seconds." Amy nodded. "Keep firing until the capacitors are dry, then switch to secondary targeting." The third wave hit. The fourth. The fifth. Ships tried to hide behind the moon, but the satellites had been positioned to cover all approaches. There was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. Commander finally understood the truth. The humans had been preparing too. They had not been idle while they trained. They had developed weapons that made his entire fleet obsolete. Every simulation, every training exercise, every carefully planned tactic was worthless. He had led his warriors into a trap. "All ships," he broadcast desperately, "begin emergency landing operations. Get our troops to the surface. We can still win on the ground." It was his only hope. His orbital forces were being slaughtered, but perhaps his ground warriors could still succeed. The humans could not have prepared for everything. 3 million soldiers were still ready to fight. 12 troop carriers managed to break through the orbital defenses. They plunged into Earth's atmosphere at maximum speed, their heat shields glowing red. Behind them, the remains of the fleet drifted in expanding clouds of debris. Amy tracked the landing craft on her sensors. She marked their projected landing zones and transmitted the data to ground forces. 12 confirmed landings, she reported. Kansas, Siberia, Australia, and North Africa. Ground units are engaging. She leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a small smile. The orbital battle was over. It had lasted exactly 61 seconds. 488 ships had been destroyed. Over 2 million warriors had died without ever reaching the planet's surface. The greatest invasion fleet in history had been reduced to burning wreckage. But the fight was not over yet. 12 carriers had made it through. Each one carried 20,000 soldiers. 240,000 warriors were now on Earth, ready to fight. They believed they still had a chance. They were wrong about that too. Sergeant Ben Torres was eating breakfast when the alarm sounded. He was stationed at Fort Riley in Kansas, enjoying scrambled eggs and toast before morning training. The alarm changed everything. Within 3 minutes, Ben was in full combat gear. Within 5 minutes, he was in an armored vehicle speeding across the base. Within 10 minutes, he was looking at something he had never expected to see. An alien spacecraft sat in the middle of a wheat field. It was the size of a football stadium, black and angular and covered in strange symbols. Smoke rose from scorch marks on its hull. A massive ramp had opened on one side and figures were pouring out. The warriors were impressive. They stood 7 feet tall and wore gleaming armor that covered every part of their bodies. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. They moved with the precision of soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Ben counted at least 1,000 of them already on the ground, with more emerging every second. They were forming into attack formations, preparing to assault human positions. His commanding officer, Captain Maria Santos, spoke through his earpiece. All units, this is Santos. Rules of engagement are simple. These are hostile invaders, weapons free. Make them regret coming here. Ben raised his rifle. It was not the rifle they had trained against. It was not a simple weapon that fired metal bullets propelled by chemical explosives. It was something far more advanced. The rifle fired tungsten carbide rounds at 3,000 feet per second. Each round was guided by a tiny computer chip that could adjust its trajectory in flight. The rounds were designed to penetrate the hardest known materials. The armor had been built to stop 20th-century weapons. It could deflect ordinary bullets. It could resist shrapnel from conventional explosives. It had been tested against every weapon in this historical database. It had never been tested against this. Ben aimed at an officer who was shouting orders to his troops. He squeezed the trigger once. The round crossed the distance between them in a fraction of a second. It hit the officer in the center of his chest. The advanced armor that had stopped countless simulated attacks crumpled like aluminum foil. The officer fell and did not get up. Across the field, human soldiers opened fire. The sound was deafening. Warriors dropped by the dozens, then by the hundreds. Their armor, their training, their century of preparation meant nothing. They tried to return fire. Their plasma weapons were powerful, capable of melting through steel. But they had been designed for close combat, for enemies that would stand and fight in formation. Human soldiers did not fight that way. The humans used cover. They moved constantly. They coordinated through encrypted communications that they could not jam. They called in support from drones that flew too high and too fast for alien weapons to target. A commander named led a charge toward the human lines. He was a veteran of 3 conquered worlds. He had killed hundreds of enemies in combat. He believed that courage and strength could overcome any obstacle. He was wrong. A drone hovering 2 miles above the battlefield detected his movement. An artificial intelligence analyzed his trajectory and calculated an intercept solution. A missile was launched. Never saw what killed him. The missile moved at 5 times the speed of sound. It struck his position with perfect accuracy. The explosion killed him and 30 warriors around him instantly. Similar scenes played out across the planet. In Siberia, Russian forces engaged the invaders with weapons that had been developed in secret facilities for decades. Electromagnetic pulse grenades disabled electronics. Robotic tanks rolled forward without any human crew to protect, absorbing plasma fire while returning devastating volleys. In Australia, Special Forces units tracked the alien landing zone from a distance. They did not attack directly. Instead, they called in coordinates for precision strikes. Hypersonic missiles arrived from bases thousands of miles away, hitting targets with accuracy measured in inches. In the Sahara Desert, the battle was shorter. The African Union had positioned experimental weapons near the landing zone. These weapons used focused microwaves to overheat anything electronic. They discovered that their advanced armor became an oven when exposed to invisible radiation. The soldiers fought bravely. They followed their training. They used tactics that had conquered a dozen worlds, but those tactics assumed certain things about their enemies. They assumed their enemies would use similar weapons and similar strategies. They assumed their enemies would stand in formations and meet them in direct combat. They assumed their armor would protect them and their weapons would be superior. Every assumption was wrong. Private First Class Jenny was 19 years old. She had joined the army 8 months ago and had never seen real combat. Now she was fighting aliens in a Kansas wheat field. She was terrified, but her training kept her moving. She fired, repositioned, fired again. She worked with her squad to establish overlapping fields of fire. She called out enemy positions and responded to commands. A soldier spotted her and charged. He was huge, his armor making him look like a metal giant. His eyes glowed with fury. He had trained for a century for this moment. Jenny was faster. She raised her weapon and fired 3 rounds in rapid succession. The first round cracked the alien's helmet. The second penetrated his faceplate. The third ended the fight. The giant fell at her feet. Jenny stared at him for 1 second, then turned to find her next target. Within 20 minutes, the battle in Kansas was over. 12,000 warriors had landed. Fewer than 300 survived to surrender. Human casualties were minimal. The same pattern repeated at every landing site. They had expected primitive resistance. They had expected a long campaign to subdue the human population. They had expected to win. Instead, they were being destroyed. Commander received reports from the surface. Each report was worse than the last. His warriors were dying by the thousands. His officers were being killed by weapons they could not see coming. His invasion had become a slaughter. He had led 3 million warriors to Earth. After 5 minutes of fighting, fewer than 50,000 remained alive. And the humans were not finished yet. The bridge of the eternal conquest was dying. Fires burned in the corners. Sparks flew from broken consoles. The lights flickered between dim red and complete darkness. Bodies lay scattered across the floor. Commander stood alone in the center of the chaos. His uniform was torn and covered in ash. A deep cut on his forehead dripped blood down his face. His hands trembled as they gripped the railing in front of him. Around him, the remains of his fleet drifted through space. 800 warships had been reduced to scattered debris. 3 million warriors, the finest the Empire had ever produced, were dead or dying. A century of preparation had ended in complete disaster. Had seen the final reports before communications failed. The ground forces were finished. His warriors had been hunted down by human soldiers, drones, and weapons that moved too fast to track. The survivors had surrendered or fled into forests and deserts, where they were being captured one by one. The whole invasion had lasted 6 minutes. A screen on the wall flickered to life. A human face appeared, calm and collected despite the circumstances. Recognized the uniform. This was a general, a high-ranking military commander. "Commander," the woman said, "I am General Lisa of the United States Space Force. Your fleet has been destroyed. Your ground forces have been eliminated. You have approximately 3 minutes before your ship loses life support." Stared at her. He wanted to feel anger. He wanted to feel hatred. But he felt only emptiness. Everything he had believed about humans, about his own abilities had been proven wrong. "How?" he whispered. His translator converted his words to English. "You were supposed to be primitive. Your species was divided. You fought among yourselves constantly. You should have been easy prey." General did not smile, but there was something in her eyes. It might have been satisfaction. It might have been pity. "Commander, you made a mistake that has destroyed better civilizations than yours. You underestimated us. You looked at our wars and saw weakness. You should have seen something else entirely." "What should I have seen?" "Practice," said simply. "Every war we fought taught us something. Every conflict made us better. While your warriors trained in simulations, ours fought real battles against enemies who were trying just as hard to kill them. We learned to adapt. We learned to improve. We learned to fight smart instead of fighting hard." Shook his head slowly. "But our intelligence indicated your technology was limited. Bullets and bombs, crude rockets. Your intelligence was 30 years out of date. In 30 years, we went from room-sized computers to machines that fit in our pockets and were 1,000,000 times more powerful. We created weapons that your simulations never predicted because they did not exist when you stopped watching." The ship groaned around them. A new alarm began to wail. Life support was failing. "You gave us 1 hour to surrender," continued. "We only needed seconds. The moment your fleet arrived, we were ready. We have been ready for a long time, Commander. We always suspected we were not alone in the universe. We prepared for the day when someone would come to conquer us. Felt something wet on his cheek. He was crying. He had not cried since he was a child. The shame of his failure was overwhelming. "What happens now?" he asked. "That depends on you. Surrender, and your surviving warriors will be treated as prisoners of war. We are not monsters, Commander. We do not enslave or torture. We will hold your people until we can negotiate with your empire for their return. And if I do not surrender, then you die in the next 2 minutes when your ship tears itself apart. Your choice." Looked around his ruined bridge. He thought about the warriors who had trusted him, who had followed him across the galaxy to their deaths. He thought about their families waiting at home for news that would never come. He had failed them, but he could still save the few who remained. "I surrender," he said quietly. "What are your terms?" General nodded. "Stand down all weapons. Power down your remaining systems. We will send ships to retrieve you and your surviving crew." Gave the orders. What little remained of his ship went dark. He stood in the silence and waited for the humans to come. On Earth, people emerged from wherever they had hidden. They looked up at the sky and saw streaks of light that were falling debris from the destroyed fleet. News spread quickly through phones and televisions. The invasion was over. Humanity had won. In a small town in Ohio, a man named stood in his front yard with his daughter Sophie. She was 6 years old and did not understand what had happened. She only knew that the loud noises had stopped and her daddy was holding her very tight. "Daddy," she said, "what were those lights in the sky?" Looked up at the stars that were just becoming visible as evening approached. He thought about what to tell her. The truth was complicated. The truth was terrifying, but it was also wonderful. "Those lights," he said finally, "were humanity saying hello to the universe." Sophie considered this. Did the universe say hello back? Laughed despite everything. "It tried, sweetheart, it tried." In the weeks that followed, the world changed. The secret of humanity's preparations was revealed. People learned about the Helsinki Protocol and the hidden weapons that had saved them. Some were angry that they had been kept in the dark. Most were simply grateful to be alive. And his surviving warriors were transported to a secure facility. They were treated fairly, given food and medical care. Human scientists began studying technology, learning new things every day. Human diplomats prepared messages to send to the Empire, explaining what had happened and warning them not to try again. General gave a press conference 6 weeks after the invasion. She stood before cameras from every nation and spoke clearly. "We have sent a message to the Empire. The message is simple. Earth is not a target. Earth is not a prize to be conquered. Earth is a warning. We are a species that has spent our entire history fighting, learning, and surviving. We will not be slaves. We will not be subjects. We will be free, and we will defend that freedom against any threat from any corner of the universe." She paused. "To anyone else out there who might be listening, who might be thinking about visiting our little planet, I have one piece of advice." She looked directly into the camera. "Call first." Above the Earth, satellites continued their endless watch. Somewhere in the darkness of space, a message was traveling toward and on the surface of the planet, 8 billion humans went back to their lives, knowing that they were no longer alone in the universe. But they were not afraid. They had faced the darkness and won. And the darkness would remember.